All right, Scottie Kimmelman here with the National Sports Media Association, and today I'm joined with the 2023 Louisiana Sportswriter of the Year and columnist at the New Orleans Advocate, Jeff Duncan. Jeff, how are you today?
Scotty, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on today.
Great, of course. Thank you for joining us. And before we get into your current work at the New Orleans Advocate, covering the different New Orleans sports teams, I want to know what got you into sports writing.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I almost got into it by default. Started my college career at Eastern Kentucky University in Richmond and was going to be a wildlife manager. I went into wildlife management, thought I was going to be like petting little animals in the zoo and stuff like that, feeding deer. And it was not that at all. It was like organic chemistry and comparative anatomy. And man, I had to bail on that. It was really difficult. The shock treatment that they do to get to weed out the prospects in the freshman year, it worked because I got out of there. And look, I'd always been a good writer, and it was something that kind of came natural to me. And I always loved sports, so I went back home to University of Louisville, where my mother was employed, and my older brother Steve, who's still in broadcast journalism at WHAS TV in Louisville. I'd always kind of followed in his footsteps, and he suggested, "Hey, you're a good writer. You like sports. Why don't you maybe think about that while you're, pursuing, your degree at the University of Louisville?" And that's kind of how I fell into it.
Right, great. And going to such a great school as the University of Louisville, you mentioned that you went there, your mother worked there. That must have been a huge propeller for your career, I'm sure. Is there anything you can take away from your time at Louisville that brought you to where you are today?
Well, yeah, I got, obviously sports are huge at U of L. And my senior year, the basketball team won the national championship
Hmm.
with Purvis Ellison and Billy Thompson. So got to cover that as a student journalist. I was the editor of this, along with Mark Coombs. We were co-sports editors of the Cardinals. So it was an incredible experience to be on a national scale at a college newspaper. And at the same time, I was working at the Courier Journal. Um, on the kind of agate desk. Back then, Scotty, take phone calls, record prep scores. You just did whatever you needed to do, and that's what I always try to advise people on if they get started in the profession. Just do whatever you can. You're not going to make a lot of money early on, but the experience is worth its weight in gold. And while I was working my way through college, I was able to get into a major metropolitan newspaper newsroom and make a lot of contacts that paid off for me down the road.
Yeah, great. And now this is your second National Sports Media Association award in Louisiana, and you said you started that, not even knowing that you wanted to go into sports writing, started at Louisville and worked your way up and up and up. How does it feel to be thought of so highly by your peers to get those two awards?
Yeah, look, it's obviously a big honor because I know it's voted on by our peers, and so that's really what means the most to me is the respect I have of my colleagues, my bosses, obviously, and your readers and your consumers out there in today's multi-platform journalism world that we're in. That's who you should be looking for respect from. I know sometimes the lines get blurred, Scotty. A lot of people worry about what maybe uh, you know fans think of you. It's tough. You want everyone to like your work, but if you're doing your job in this profession, you're not going to please everybody all the time, especially as a columnist where you're paid to write an opinion. If you're doing your job right, half the people aren't going to like your opinion, half the people are going to love it.
Right.
And so if you're trying to win a popularity contest, that you're not in the right field. So it's nice when your peers
Hmm.
recognize your work, because really, in the end, along with your bosses and your higher ups at your office, those are the most important people that I respect.
Great. And I also want to talk about your current work covering the New Orleans sports teams. I know you cover the Saints, Pelicans as well. What does it mean for you to be able to cover those different sports teams in New Orleans day in and day out?
Well, I always say, look, we punch above our weight class here in New Orleans. We're not a huge market, compared to, say, Dallas or Los Angeles or New York. But
Hmm.
man, for what I do, I don't think you can get in a better market. I mean, we've got the Super Bowl coming in next year. It'll be our 11th Super Bowl. I've covered a number of them, all of them here. We have national championship football games here, in addition to the Pelicans of the NBA, where we've had NBA All-Star games in the past. Obviously, the Saints are the #1 ticket in town, but we also have great college sports with Tulane and UNO and LSU right down the road. So it's just an incredible interest in sports in New Orleans. Sometimes I think our priorities are out of whack, to be honest with you. A lot of times when I write a column, it ends up on the front page of the paper.
Right.
That's great. I mean, it's great exposure for your work. And when you write something about the Saints in particular, or the Pelicans, or anybody in this town, it resonates, and so that means something. You go out, people, have read your work. They love to talk to you about your work, so you feel the importance of the job. And I don't take that lightly. I know it's a big responsibility in what we're doing in our profession. So it just it's just an incredible place to work. It's why I've been here so long. I've had opportunities to go elsewhere, bigger platforms, bigger outlets, but nothing is quite as rewarding as being kind of the voice of this community's sports section.
That's amazing. Love to hear it. And lastly, if there's any advice for an aspiring sports writer or just anybody who wants to be affiliated in or work in the sports media business, what would you tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get asked a lot about that, and there's a couple of things I always try and tell people. One is stay passionate, find what you're passionate about, and pursue it. And I always try and tell people I think you can't get enough experience writing. I mean, just try to write as much as you can about as many different subjects. I try to tell people, if you're getting into sports journalism because you're a sports fan, that's fine, but you really need to be a journalist first and a fan second. After Hurricane Katrina, it was the biggest story we've ever covered down here. We all became news reporters. I mean, sports really was irrelevant at that time. The whole city was underwater. We all need to pull up our bootstraps and cover this disaster, this catastrophe that hit our city. And you learn the basic tenets of sports writing apply to every type of news reporting. And I was covering fires and search and rescue missions and everything. And it really put into perspective what sports is, kind of a diversion. They call it the toy department for a reason. So I tell people all the time, try to be a journalist first, because you're not in it to really be pulling for the teams you cover. Obviously, you got to be objective. Obviously, you root for the good story, but first and foremost, your duty is to the truth and to trying to show both sides of the story. So I think that's getting lost a little bit more as we get in further into the gray area that is, we have teams now, they have their own media departments, and LSU has a huge media department, have their own reporters covering the team. So I think for sometimes the readers, it's hard for them to distinguish between mainstream journalists and journalists working for the teams. So I try to keep that line as distinct as I can and let our readers know and understand that I'm there to try and write the truth as best as I can get to it, give my opinion, make sure it's an informed opinion and fair, but also have fun while we're doing it, hopefully entertain people at the same time, because it isn't life and death we're covering here. We are covering games, but I do take it seriously. And the last thing I would say is just do it. Like I said earlier, just do whatever you can to get started, whether that's covering high school sports or rodeos or fishing tournaments. It all counts down the road. You can build your resume. It'll show your bosses or your future bosses the initiative you have. And that's important.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. I really appreciate it.
Sure, Scotty, man. Good luck. Hopefully I'll see you. Are you going to be at the award ceremony or not?
We'll see. Well, I'll have to see about that. It's close to where I work, but we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, if you need anything else, let me know, man. I appreciate you reaching out and doing this.
All right. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.